you joined us here this evening. We'd like you to please take a moment and share this with others and share it on your socials. Tonight, I am your host, Scott King. Our co-host, Robyn, is not going to be here this evening. She's got some other stuff going on, so just keep her in your thoughts. We just want to let you guys know, we know what it's like to be hopeless and helpless, and your journey is not over. You can rewrite it at any time. We provide a platform here for people to share stories on how they've reclaimed their lives with dietary intervention. Less of Me Success Stories is a collaboration between Robyn and I of guests that can come on and share inspirational stories from across the internet that we found, just friends in the community, how they both healed themselves physically and mentally through a range of low carb, carnivore, whatever it is, just basically a low carb deal. We encourage interaction through our YouTube channel with a live chat. I will be fielding those as well. So when I am looking away, don't think I'm ignoring anybody. I'm just looking on the YouTube channel. And as a reminder, neither us or the guest are medical professionals, and we're not offering any medical advice. So please consult your medical team before attempting any intervention. So with that said, I would love to introduce you to this amazing woman I've met on the internet, the community, Michelle Hurn. She's amazing. She's done so much for the community. She's a dietitian. She's multiple book author, ultra runner or marathoner. I'm not sure which is the correct terminology, but I'll let her get into all that. So, hey, thank you so much for joining us and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you. So what we usually do is we just start the first part of the show off with just having the guest do a background, kind of just, where everything started, maybe even back to early years, and then where it brings us up to here, what has worked for you, and then we'll start interjecting with some questions, and in the second half, hopefully get some involvement with the chat.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's great. So, my health journey began when I was 12. When I was 12, I was diagnosed with anorexia nervosa. So I was 5 feet tall and 57.5 pounds. So extremely underweight. I went to an inpatient treatment center for 2 months. I was immediately put on a 24-hour tube feeding system and fed the standard American diet. And as you can imagine, first of all, my health was really poor. I was given, the doctor told my parents about a 10% chance to survive. And I was told very early on, if you do survive, if you make it through this, you're going to likely be dealing with, symptoms of anorexia your whole life. I was told I might never grow. I was told you're going to have racing thoughts around food, anxiety, depression. Like this is just kind of your new lot in life. It was pretty scary. It's funny as you can reflect as an adult, like to hear that as a 12-year-old. And since, I went from starvation to being fed the standard American diet. When I was in treatment, I was put on 7 different medications because I was having all kinds of GI issues. And as they predicted, severe anxiety and, racing thoughts and things like that. But, I did become weight restored. I left treatment, became weight restored. But I, through my adolescence and into early adulthood, struggled severely, with very severe depression, anxiety, periods of time, suicidal ideation. And I knew food was important and powerful. Obviously it's gone from being very underweight to a stable weight. And I was curious, it was hard as a young person to see, your peers and family and people, they seemed to have what I would consider a relatively normal relationship with food. And they didn't seem to be standing on the sidelines of their own life, which I feel like I was doing. I was constantly ruminating, worrying, obsessing about food. And so, I wanted to become a dietitian because I thought, like, what if I can understand what's happening in my body and my brain? As a young person, I hypothesized that, I need more fruits and vegetables. I need more antioxidants. That must be it. And so to become a dietitian, you get your 4-year degree and then you go through the internship program. And, one thing that was really interesting when I went into the dietetic internship, things just didn't make sense. We'd go into a room with somebody with type 2 diabetes. And, type 2 diabetes, obviously disease of high blood glucose. And my preceptor would say, okay, we're going to teach these people how to eat carbohydrates throughout the day and then dose them with medication throughout the day. And I at the time, I just asked questions like, oh, wait a second, like, should we teach them to eat less carbohydrates? Because their blood sugar is high, right? And so maybe less. But one of the problems, and I don't think I can fully make people realize, just as a dietitian, it's just pounded into your head that, you know, carbohydrates are the foundation of human nutrition. You can never have too many fruits and vegetables. Fiber is important. Doesn't matter if you're overweight, underweight, you know, have kidney failure, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, these healthy, quote unquote, whole grains, those are the foundation of human nutrition. And so, you know, I was young, I was a student, like, okay, I guess I'm learning here. And then I remember going to the room with somebody who had been in a traumatic car accident. So, you know, they're being fed with the nasogastric tube, kind of like I had when I was in treatment. And I remember flipping over the bag and being like, oh my God, this is the same stuff I was fed when I was 12. At that point, I was 24. And it's, you know, maltodextrin, corn syrup, soy protein, canola oil. And even now I'm 41, it's the same thing. And so I proposed the question. I asked my preceptors, like, why wouldn't we include some type of like fish oils, or why isn't this more anti-inflammatory? This doesn't seem right. Is this, I mean, basically posing, is this the best way to feed someone who's been in an accident? And I was just told it's just protein and calories. Stop asking all these questions. And so, you know, you became a dietitian, and it's very hard because you just see this revolving door of sickness. People would come in with type 2 diabetes, and we'd give them the guidelines, and they would come back in not too long after, and their blood sugar was worse, and they'd have infections, and you'd have people with heart disease. And it was a mess. But, you know, I was told, like, hey, it's just the patient. They just need to, they're not doing what we tell them to do. There's a lot of patient blaming and shaming. And then, you know, I didn't really start to address nutrition or fully embrace or appreciate low carbohydrate nutrition until I really had my own health crisis in 2019. And that's when, you know, my world changed and kind of led us to where we are today.
Sorry, I had it on mute. Okay, so yeah, that's a lot of questions I have. So you said the anorexia nervosa. Is that what you said?
Yeah, and I think now they just call it anorexia.
Okay. So I didn't know if there was like the nervosa meant anything on that. So it's just like a generic term basically now.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So you're I didn't realize how dire yours was. 10% to survive. That is crazy. That's bonkers. You said at 12 years old, correct? Did you say it was at 12 years old is when you started, or were you in?
Yeah, I mean, I probably started struggling when I was 11, you know, but by the time I was in treatment, and it wasn't a long process. You know, some people struggle for years before they're hospitalized, but I lost, you know, a relatively large amount of weight relatively quickly.
Do you have any idea what might have led for you to go that direction to the anorexia? Or
it's a good question. Yeah, you know, and I mean, even research studies, like, what is it, nature? Is it nurture? You know, we do think there are some genetic components to anorexia. You know, my family has a history of mental illness. My mom was bipolar, type 2, and definitely grew up in an environment that weight was a big deal. You know, being overweight was kind of conducive to being not good enough, unlovable. And so I think as a young person, you know, I definitely internalized that, took that on. And unfortunately, you know, I was probably more predisposed. I mean, because obviously my sisters grew up in the same environment and didn't end up with, you know, the same consequences. So, but, you know, I think you have the combination of that genetic and then the, you know, environmental storm. And unfortunately, by the time it started to really happen, I had completely lost control of it. You know, your brain and your body are no longer functioning very well when they're completely undernourished.
You brought up something just now. You're talking about the mental struggles of things. We've had a lot of people on here that we had on here just to talk about weight loss with low carb, and so many of them, as a byproduct from all this, developed or healed mental issues, mental disabilities, maybe just clarity. Did you experience any of that, or did you notice that?
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. I mean, part of my story, you know, when I had kind of my own health crisis, and I guess I'll just briefly touch on that. In 2019, I was trying to qualify for the Olympic trials in the marathon. So to do that, you need to run at that time, it was 2 hours and 48 minutes. I believe they've dropped the standard. And I'd run 2 hours and 54 minutes. So I was training really hard, you know, trying to get this qualifying time. And I, all of a sudden, I wasn't recovering well. I just felt like, I would go into a run. I felt flat. I wasn't sleeping well. And after a few weeks of just feeling awful, I reached out to a few dietitian friends, and they said, hey, you're not eating enough carbs. You're not eating enough calories. And at that point, I was eating 350 plus grams of carbs a day, which is quite a bit. And so I increased it, 400 up to 500 grams a day. And as you can imagine, that didn't go particularly well. I was driving to work. I broke out in a cold sweat. My anxiety went from bad to paralyzing, just absolutely awful. And then the kind of come to Jesus moment was when I was working at the hospital at the time, and we had a young patient pass away. So I actually came home early. It was just a rough day and fell asleep on the couch, woke up, and it just felt like my body was on fire. And I think a lot of people relate to this. And in that, if you're doing everything the medical system tells you to do, and maybe you're taking medication, you're eating in a certain way, and you're just not only not getting better, you're getting worse. And you even try some alternative stuff, it's like nothing I was doing was working. And so I'm just standing there. It's 2 a.m. in my living room. I do not know what to do. Like, I'm out of answers. And so I grabbed my car keys and drove to 7-Eleven, got 30 pounds of ice, brought it home and just put it in the bathtub. And I'm just sitting in this ice bath, just bawling. And that's when my wife was like, hey, look, we got to do something different. And I was like, yeah, I'm done. I'm done running. This is stupid. I'm over it. I'm over competing. I'm too old. Everything. I just felt broken. And, when we're suffering, it's not just us. I was obviously suffering, but so was she. I was not short. I was short with her. I wasn't present. I wasn't doing great at my job. Like, my whole world was suffering. And so that it's funny now, because I certainly didn't think like that. Like, if you had told me like, hey, Michelle, this was going to be a pivotal turning point in your life, at that point, I would have had some choice words for you, right? Like, get out of here. But it was, because the next day I thought, like, if I'm not running, I kind of intuitively knew all these carbohydrates weren't making me feel well, but it's so ingrained in you as a dietitian that you need them. I just thought, like, well, why don't I follow a ketogenic diet, just for a short period of time. Let me just try this just for a minute, just to see. And then I stumbled upon the carnivore diet. And that's when, I ended up doing that for 30 days. And my wife was very against that initially. She was worried it was restrictive and eating disordered. But after 3 weeks doing that, she literally pulled me aside and was like, this is the best your anxiety has been in the 11 years that I've known you.
Oh, wow. That's incredible. So prior to 19, you were doing just healthy eating. What do you thought was healthy eating then? Correct?
Yeah. And people have asked me like, well, if you're eating all these carbohydrates, were you taking in a ton of sugar? And the answer is not really. I certainly had some like sports drinks, but I was eating a lot of brown rice, a lot of oatmeal, a lot of fruit. I ate meat every day. But it was, a little bit of chicken, maybe a little bit of beef, some protein powders here and there. But yeah, my diet was very carbohydrate heavy.
Okay. And then you go to carnivore, and then you wean off carnivore, go more just keto, low carb.
Yeah. Now, as well, I never intended really to run again. So I thought like, oh, a 0 carb or a very low carbohydrate diet. Like, I was having so much success with that, from the mental health and just the feeling really well physically. I thought like, this is what I'll do. But then when I, decided like, okay, well, maybe if I'm feeling better, I can train, and actually the first time I trained, Corinne actually was like, I was just home more, because I used to be gone, if you're a runner, these weekends you're gone on these long runs. And she just kind of made like a off comment, like, you should go for a run. Because I was just kind of around and I was annoying her. And I was like, all right, drop the ego. I don't have to be fast. It's good. I'm going to go jog. And I ran and felt great. And so that's when, I ended up working with Zach Bitters, who at the time was a 100-mile world record holder. Since then, someone's gotten that record from him, but he's a fantastic guy, runner, and coach. And he follows a low carbohydrate diet. So he's really helped me be able to, set it up so where I can oxidize as much fat for fuel as possible. Because that's the goal. It doesn't matter if you're a high carbohydrate or low carbohydrate athlete. You want to be able to preserve muscle glycogen. And then we can use carbohydrates specifically and strategically. And that's what I've been doing for the last, almost 5 years now. It's been going really well.
Okay. I'm going to have so many questions. Like
I
mentioned before, I'm going to have a lot of selfish questions for myself, for my own.
Don't mind at all.
Our friend Natalie has a question, and you kind of hit on a little bit. She's asking, what made you think of keto being a possible solution? Was it just going against all the carbs you were taking in and just trying to do the opposite, or what was your
Yeah.
thought on
I intuitively knew that the carbs weren't making me feel well, and I tend to, I guess my personality is a little bit more extreme where, and I think I was just in so much pain. Like, I don't think I can fully describe. And I mean, if somebody's been there, and not just like the physical pain, just really struggling with, panic attacks and anxiety. I mean, once again, to the point where I'm like, I can't even get in my car and drive to work, that I thought, what if I just do kind of almost like a 180, or 360, I guess would be the correct term, where you just completely flip. And I at that time, I had done minimal research on ketogenic diets. Once again, this was never taught to me in the dietetic program. It was never brought up as an option for anything other than severe treatment, the epilepsy that didn't respond to treatment. And so that's why I was like, okay, if I do this, I'll be eating a lot more protein, a lot more fat, and then really tamping down on the carbohydrates. So the goal was really just like, let's quash this inflammation. And then upon starting to research that, I discovered the carnivore diet. And that's when I was like, oh, this is super interesting. And it is, really looking at the potential for not only the anti-inflammatory effect, but even some of the autoimmune stuff. Like, man, I wonder if there's certain foods that are really aggravating, my symptoms. And then, after doing it for several weeks and having such good results, that's when I really started diving into the research. And while we don't have, really good studies on the carnivore diet, we certainly have, extensive studies on low carbohydrate and ketogenic diets when it comes to type 2 diabetes. And now we have them on bipolar disorder and all kinds of things, traumatic brain injury, Alzheimer's. And so I was just blown away, like, wow, nobody told me, nobody taught me this, So I was just, once again, I was fascinated just in general. And then just seeing how well it was working for myself, made me want to keep going.
Yeah. Okay. So I know it wasn't really talked about too much with the keto diet, especially I'm speaking mainly in the field you were in. When you went that direction, other than your wife kind of raising some eyebrows, is that kind of frowned upon in the beginning in your industry that you
Oh, and not just in the beginning, it's still frowned upon.
Okay. Okay, so nothing's changed.
Yeah, no, most dietitians, it's amazing because now we have such good research. We did before then. It was Dr. Eric Westman and of course Dr. Bickman, and I mean, there's so many fantastic researchers. Gosh, I'm thinking Chris Palmer, Satish Shivani, that have demonstrated just how powerful ketones can be for various conditions. And dietitians today are still so afraid, like, oh, saturated fat's bad for you. It's bad for your heart. Your brain needs carbs, all this nonsense. It's totally not true. But we also have to remember that the Academy of Nutrition, the governing board of all dietitians, is heavily sponsored by processed foods. So from the time we're in college to our intern education, and you don't have to be a rocket scientist. You can go to a hospital and see what they're feeding people. It's horrendous. It's all this sugar and carbohydrates. And, dietitians just preach moderation, which nobody knows. It's really sad. Dietitians are basically a cog in the wheel to keep people sick. And I don't say that as like, it's not towards any one dietitian or one person. It's a very fundamentally flawed system. And I was there too, and I don't judge or anybody that's in that system. I've had people reach out to me and say, I know this is wrong, but I can't leave. I have student loans out the wazoo. What are you supposed to do? You have people trapped in the system where they literally have to give advice that hurts people or they get fired. So it's a mess.
Yeah, it's so frustrating, and I completely agree with you. I'm not trying to put it on me or nothing, but I was on Dr. Tro's pod a year ago, and he mentioned before, basically the same thing. But with me, like having gastric bypass in the past, he basically said, on behalf of the medical community, I apologize because we did you a disservice because we knew you're going to have lifelong complications from this gastric bypass. So it's just like, it's almost like it's kind of just making sure you get repeat customers. I mean, I'm not trying to sound bad, but
no, it's true. I mean, and if you think about it, I mean, type 2 diabetes, I was floored. Dr. Berry and I and several other doctors are on the American Diabetes Society, or we got this 501c3. It's going to hopefully change the face of type 2 diabetes. But why we tell somebody who has a blood sugar intolerance to eat carbs is the stupidest thing. I mean, just my 6-year-old niece can figure this out. Blood sugar is high, carbs make blood sugar go up. Okay, less carbs, But dietitians will have you eat carbs, and then we'll just dose you with insulin. And we'll do that in our skilled nursing facilities. We'll do that in nursing homes. We'll do that in jails. We'll do that in hospitals. I mean, now children. The youngest person I saw in the hospital is 8 who had type 2 diabetes. But the amount of money that was made in the last statistic I saw available was 2022, was 420 billion with a B dollars. So if you think that things are going to change top down at any time, if you think dietitians are going to be encouraged to do low carb reverses it. Why in the world did we reverse something that is so incredibly profitable?
Right. Yeah, that's going to hurt a lot of pocketbooks if people got healthy.
Yeah, they're not interested. They will fight, and they're on the boards. They own. I mean, Nina Teicholz was the first person to tell me that every member of Congress is sponsored by at least one pharmaceutical company, several. So these people, have a fiduciary responsibility to their sponsors. I don't care what they say, they do. They will. They say it doesn't. Of course it does. That's what corporate lobbying is. So, that's why we have to keep doing this grassroots. This is why we have to keep talking about this. You have to be an educated person, because if you depend on the large system, you're going to be in trouble.
Right. Absolutely. A couple of years ago, I ended up in the hospital for an emergency surgery, and they kept trying to feed me. And I remember it made me think of this. I'm like, oh, I don't eat carbs. And like, oh, okay, I got you covered. And they brought in saltine crackers, and I was like, oh, thank you, but I just don't eat carbs. Thank you so much. Oh, don't worry, I got you covered. And they brought me in a frozen slushy thing and everything like that. And then I just told them I don't feel good. I'd lost.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm drinking water.
Or even like my daughter ended up in the hospital a couple months ago, and they had what do they call it? It was the family healthy snack area, and I think water was about all you could consume out of that thing. It's
all carbohydrates. It truly, I mean, everything in the hospital is, from the applesauce to the crackers to most hospitals even have soda machines on the floors. Juice, which is just as bad, if not worse than soda, puddings.
Energy drinks everywhere.
Yeah, it's really, hospitals, I always, as a young person, I thought hospitals should be a place where you went to prevent inflammation and oxidation. Mental health is even worse, so the hospitals are a terrible example. But once again, they're following these standard guidelines that they legally, for most systems, have to do that.
I'm looking at my notes here, and you mentioned something earlier about whole grains, and I know me being 47 years old and a kid of the 80s, it was all fat-free and whole grains. Is there such thing as a good whole grain, or is a whole grain a grain is a grain type of thing?
Yeah, I think a whole grain is a grain is a grain. And the strange thing too is, the more quote unquote whole something is, the more phytic acid it's going to have. Meaning, like, if you have brown rice versus white rice, people might say like, oh, the fiber in brown rice causes a slightly less blood sugar spike, which is probably true because it does have fiber. But phytic acid is a problem. What is phytic acid? It's a component in things like seeds, beans, nuts. It's that kind of like, usually like, kind of outside, you remove it like white rice wouldn't have as much phytic acid because you're removing that outer shell. But it forms covalent bonds with vitamins and minerals, specifically iron and calcium. And the number one vitamin or mineral deficiency worldwide is iron. And so I feel like the tiny amount of iron we do get as humans, whether that's from meat, most people don't eat organs, but if you're eating a little bit of, red meat, people are eating so much, breads and grains and all this stuff that's binding with iron. And so, yeah, I think it's so silly that we've taught people like, oh, just don't eat white bread, eat whole grain bread. It doesn't matter. It's causing the same problems, maybe even potentially more. Nina Teicholz just wrote an article for Richer or Poor talking about how low income people were having a lot of success with low carbohydrate diet, trying to dispel the myth that it's expensive. But she pointed to a study where 454 families were put on the Mediterranean diet for a whole year. The government did this study. And the goal was, and not just like, hey, here's your information. It was like they met with a doctor, they met with a dietitian. They had the food bought and paid for a whole freaking year, because they were like, we are going to show that if you follow a Mediterranean diet, Your blood sugar is going to get better. These people had type 2 diabetes in their family. And at the end of the year, they were like, holy crap, it didn't get better. That was I mean, the guy says it a little bit nicer if you read the paper, but even the head researcher said, yeah, we were wrong. Because what happens, you can't feed people glucose and expect their blood glucose to drop. They were eating whole grain rice, whole grain bread, lean meat, lean dairy. It doesn't work. It does not work. It's not good or healthy for you. It's all a sham.
I'm glad you brought up Mediterranean diet. My mom is going through a lot of health issues right now. Just last week or this week, I'm sorry, just was told, get on a Mediterranean diet. It'll help. And I'm like, unfortunately, I saw that coming from a mile away. And it is just the most frustrating thing. It's just, I'm not going to tell her what to do, even though I kind of feel like I'm a pretty decent example of what to follow. But she's so scared of her health issues that she's doing exactly what the doctor told her, because she comes from a generation of what the doctor says is 100% right, no matter what proven statistics show otherwise. And it's just so sad
that a lot of people believe doctors like they would a religion. We're all human, and I know we're all doing the best we can. And, when it comes to the Mediterranean diet, once again, you can't ask somebody with metabolic dysfunction, meaning high blood pressure, high blood sugar, to continue to eat these things that cause the issue. Maybe it'll get a little better if you have some fiber. But like I said, this was a year-long study. They didn't lose weight. They didn't improve any markers of inflammation. They didn't improve their blood glucose, where these, they had people also do a low carbohydrate diet for a month. And they saw massive improvements, once again, because it's glucose, it's insulin that we really need to suppress to start improving our health. And when people talk about the Mediterranean diet and they ask me questions, I'm all for it. I do think we should be eating more omega-3s and DHA and EPA, which are, fatty fish. And I'm lucky I live in the Pacific Northwest, so we have salmon. I think people would do much better at incorporating more salmon and mackerel and, things that we don't necessarily eat a lot of, oysters and what else, mussels and things like that. But all the carbohydrates, that's not ideal.
Yeah. Kind of going back to what you're saying earlier. So I don't know how much you know of my background, but I had gastric bypass and it failed for me, like so many people. But one of the things I've gained from gastric bypass, other than all my weight back, is I got hypoglycemia from gastric bypass. And that was one thing that with the whole grains thought was I could not figure out. I had the gastric bypass and I started feeling lousy, like after lunch or after breakfast, I'm sorry. And I couldn't figure out what was going on. I'm like, maybe I'm having too much sugar. So I went like on nothing but oatmeal, and I cut out the sugar. So it made it taste even worse. And it was no improvement. It was maybe even worse because I cut back the sugar. Maybe I can have a little more oatmeal. But how those carbs hit me, and it was significantly worse than like it's just a sugar crash type.
Yeah, and that's one of the issues, and that's why when I say things to people like, I feel like oats and juice are worse than donuts and soda, people get really like, well, what do you mean? What do you mean? I said, because there's not a human alive that if you say, is a donut good for you? They would say, nah, no, it's not. But if you say, is oatmeal good for you? People would be like, yeah, sure it is. It has this perception that it's really good for you. And there's another study done by this doctor. He had teenage boys eat either regular oats, steel cut oats, or like eggs and fruit. And then they measured their blood sugar and, and then it was like they had them sit for like 4 hours, measure their blood sugar, measured a few other things. And then they gave them free access to eat after those 4 hours. And the boys that had it was like the instant oats, blood sugar tanked, adrenaline increased, and they plowed down up to 1,000 calories at that 4-hour mark. Now the steel cut oats, same thing, blood sugar, but it was a slightly less tank. And they ate, I want to say it was like 500 to 800. The eggs and fruit, it was like flatline. They were totally fine, chilling out. And then they just ate kind of like a normal lunch, And so once again, we're teaching people to eat these foods. In my opinion, I'm not anti-carbohydrate. I certainly, for my running and my goals, consume carbohydrates, but the foundation of human nutrition, you know, what I think we've seen, what anthropologists have seen, what we see with healthy, thriving humans, is we start with animal protein and fat. That will stabilize your blood sugar. That will provide neurotransmitters and all the coup factors for your brain. Because, you know, meat and fat, it's not just like protein and, you know, fat. It's, you know, B12, it's folate, it's zinc, it's iron, it's all these things that make it work perfectly and synergistically. And we think, we've tried to outthink the room. We think that, you know, starting your day with flour and sugar is going to fuel the human. We're like, I don't understand why the kids can't sit still and think. It's like, we feed our kids cereals and Pop-Tarts and these crazy sugary coffee drinks. And then we give him, you know, Taco Bell at lunch. And it's like, I don't understand why he's anxious and tired. Well, yeah, you're giving the supercomputer. Humans are supercomputers, right? We need this specific input, especially young growing humans. Mm-hmm. They need protein, they need fat. And we're throwing just sugar at them and being like, I don't know what's wrong. He has an attitude. Let's just start. I mean, just it's such basic things. Let's give people water instead of soda. Let's give people animal protein instead of garbage in the morning. Yeah, I mean, that's one thing that drastically, you know, when people like where to start, and we'll talk more about this later, is start by having protein first thing in the morning. Get your kids to eat eggs. Break up with this idea that breakfast has to be sweet. You know, people think if I don't have a religious experience by 8, if I'm not like shocked down on sugar, something's wrong. You know, have some food from the night before, fast. You know, there's so many different options.
With having the gastro, or the hypoglycemia, I am super sensitive to the insulin, the sugar dumps, everything like that. And that was probably the first thing I noticed after eating low carb was, I think it was like literally my first meal, like say lunchtime, I was expecting to like start falling asleep and being lethargic and not being able to concentrate on stuff. And I thought I just had a good day. And then it happened at dinner, then it happened the next day. And I was like, oh, wow. I was actually just talking about it the other day, is there has to be something when you're not taking in the sugar, not taking in the carbs, and you're just consistent the whole entire time. There's no spikes or dumps or drops in mental clarity, in physical, you know, feel tiredness. I mean, that was like that's right there alone was like one of the greatest things, because I thought it was just normal to not be able to focus for about an hour and a half after you eat lunch because you were just so lethargic.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I don't think, you know, this is interesting. I don't have studies on this, but it's my experience with myself and with so many other young people I work with that have had eating disorders. They're very sensitive to blood sugar dips. And it's scary. Like you can eat, you know, I used to eat oatmeal and 2 hours later, I could literally be sweating. You know, I used to, when I would finish a run, and if I didn't eat in 20 minutes, I would get like dizzy, shaky. Like it's not normal. Your body should be able to be burning fat for fuel. But when you're constantly, people just don't realize how powerful insulin is. Like if I could, one thing I could leave to the world is insulin suppresses fatty acid oxidation. And that is a fancy way of saying when you have insulin on board, your body cannot burn fat. It's like a switch. It's like, it's not like, oh, it decreases. Wow. It's like falls off a cliff. And if you cannot burn fat, you're burning sugar. And as soon as that sugar, you know, is done burning, you're going to need more sugar. That's why I've seen people eat thousands of calories. I mean, you can eat pancakes and orange, all thousands of calories worth of food. And within 2 hours, their body's telling them they're hungry. It's not that they don't have enough calories. They've literally, you know, caused this blood sugar reaction and probably gone pretty hypoglycemic. So it's really unfortunate if we can teach people how to eat, to not have that. Like you said, I've had people, I mean, and that's one of the reasons that a low carbohydrate diet is so sustainable, because people like not feeling like garbage. You know, I get to eat delicious food and I don't feel crappy every 2 hours, and I can focus on my work. Food should be something you eat and move on. It shouldn't be I eat and then, oh crap, it's 11, it's not quite time to eat yet, but should I have a snack? You know, so yeah.
It's funny you mentioned the sweat thing. Yeah, it was clockwork. I would just be drenched. My wife would see it coming from a mile away, and I would just get drenched. And then when I got drenched, it means I need to find somewhere to lay down because I'm going to be out for a while, like literally pass out. And there was so many times I worked graveyard shift for a while, and I remember I literally passed out for a couple hours sometimes, and just lost time and everything.
That's crazy.
Which has to say something that couldn't be too good. That food is causing me to literally pass out. I mean,
not ideal. No, I mean, it's once again, it's powerful stuff. And that's why I wish we would, the idea of getting away from like worrying about people, like how many calories does this have? How does this impact my metabolism? That's what I wish we said. Like, how does this keep my blood sugar stable? How does this make my brain function? How does this keep insulin levels low? That's the way we should be focusing our nutrition on.
Got a question from Natalie again. It says, do you see patients? If you do, how do you guide folks to keto? For example, someone who is terrified of cholesterol and all the other scare tactics we hear about.
Oh yeah, we can talk about that. Yeah. And yeah, I do see patients. And so if anybody is interested in seeing me, my website, thedietitiansdilemma.net, just contact me through there. You can do consults. I'm happy to do that. Yeah. So when it comes to cholesterol, here's the deal. So if you go to any cardiologist, well, first of all, if you eat an animal-based diet, it is very likely you will see a rise in your LDL, your low density lipoprotein. And that scares, like most cardiologists will go running. That's caused cardiologists now to prescribe statins like they're candy. They just give them out. It's ridiculous. I think we're going to see a huge blowback from that in, 20 to 50 years. But what happened, this happened around the 70s, is doctors were looking at people that had heart attacks. If you look at like if this is an artery and there's a clog in your artery, and you look in that, you dissect that clog, you'll actually find LDL. You'll find low density lipoprotein. But on the flip side, LDL has so many important functions in the body. It's very important in your immune system. We have meta-analysis, 600,000 plus people, that people with higher LDL actually have less cognitive decline and less risk of infection, especially as they age. And so the question is, well, what's going on? Is LDL split personality? Is it helping us 1 minute and then clogging our arteries the next minute? So instead of saying like, oh, high LDL clogs your arteries, that's bad. What I wish doctors and people would say is why? Why is LDL getting stuck in your artery? Because if it was just high LDL caused heart disease and heart attacks, then the new Eskimos in Alaska would all be dead. I mean, their LDL is sometimes over 400. They eat seal blubber and whale blubber. Their diet is 80% fat, and they have no heart disease. They have no issues until they incorporate the American diet, which unfortunately, that's kind of gone. The Maasai in Kenya, it's another culture that eats a very high saturated fat diet. Heart disease and cancer, all that is non-existent. So it can't just be the fat. Once again, the question is, why? Why does it get stuck? And so ask your doctor if he knows this. I would love to hear his answer. So you have to have some type of inflammation and oxidation within your artery for LDL to get stuck. If not, it's just flowing through, doing its job, doing what it's supposed to do. But the number one cause of inflammation and oxidation within your arteries is hyperglycemia over time, type 2 diabetes. If you think about that, think about someone with type 2 diabetes. What happens? They get damage in their arteries. Their arterias of your eyes, you start to have problems. You start to have peripheral neuropathy in your legs. You're getting damage down here. A person with type 2 diabetes has a 2 to 4-fold risk of heart disease because that high blood sugar is causing damage in their heart walls. The number one cause of death from mental illness is actually heart disease. And what the prescription drugs we give people elevate their blood glucose. A lot of the antipsychotics do. Are there other things that can cause inflammation, oxidation within the arteries? Absolutely. There's autoimmune stuff. There's lupus. I guarantee you that's not the number one driver. There's always somebody that's like, what about? Yes, there are other things that do that. But the number one cause, and the thing that if you went to a cardiologist, ideally they would say, well, let's look at your blood sugar. Let's look at your triglycerides. Let's look at those numbers. But what do? They say, oh, fat is bad. So what happens if you reduce animal fat? If you reduce saturated fat, you tend to increase carbohydrates. So now you've exacerbated the problem. What a mess.
Yeah. Seems like we're pretty screwed, whatever advice we get. But
good way to keep people sick.
Unfortunately, you're right. Yeah. You briefly hit on something that I wanted to get your thoughts on. Fasting. Do you have any thoughts on fasting?
Yeah, I think fasting is a super powerful tool, but I also think there's a few things, certainly if you, it's kind of like anything else where you really want to, like, what are my goals? For somebody like myself, who's maybe like very athletic, fasting is likely not ideal if you're trying to get enough calories. For somebody with a history of a severe eating disorder, like very underweight or has gone through like restrictive phases, and I tell a lot of young women I work with, sorry, you don't get to fast. But for somebody who's like obese, especially intermittent fasting, somebody who maybe has like a major, a cancer, that's certainly fasting can be, because you want to be getting your ketone levels up. So I would say, if you're doing intermittent fasting or you're just shortening your eating window, meaning maybe you say, okay, I'm eating between, 10 and 6, or some people do shorter eating windows. I think that's great. If you're doing extended fast, 1 to 3, some people even do 7-day fast. I think you probably want to make sure you're checking in with somebody that knows what you're doing. You're going to have to be supplementing with electrolytes. And certainly if you're on any blood glucose lowering medications, do not fast until you check in with your doctor. You don't want to get, life-threatening low blood glucose here.
I don't know if you would want to give a thumbs up or down on this, but someone that is healthy, no medication, and stays on top of electrolytes and everything like that, would you say extended fasting is here nor there, or is beneficial, or do we not want to go down there? Okay.
I don't know. If you're metabolically healthy, it's so rare to be metabolically healthy. Why might you do that? There's some really good research on autophagy, meaning, cellular turnover. It can be a really powerful and positive thing. A lot of the people that I work with tend to be coming from a place where they're struggling with something, whether it's like, I'm dealing with, type 2 diabetes, I'm dealing with overeating. And more often than not, my goal is consistency, to where it's like, okay, I don't necessarily want you to like fast for a day or a few days. I would much rather get you a little bit more stable. But if somebody, if you have maybe potentially a disease that's been resistant to treatment, or like I said, a rare type of cancer that we know responds very well to high ketones, I think that would make sense. But I don't do a lot of extended fasts with people, so I know Jason Fung likes that, but I'm definitely not an expert in that area.
That was a selfish question for me.
Oh yeah, you could. Yeah, if you want
to. So you did mention some stuff about carbs. That some carbs are doable or okay, or could you go into that? What they would be? Is it moderation? Just for someone not really sure on that.
I don't think it's moderation, because moderation is, I hate that word just because I don't know what that means. And I also think it's just such a weird word. It's like when say people, your life needs to be balanced. It's like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Good luck being successful at anything being balanced. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe somebody can disagree with me on that, but the talented and driven humans I know tend to be very unbalanced, and that doesn't mean you don't have a family and a good life there, but you also put a lot of your energy in towards what you're passionate about, what you're working on. But as far as carbohydrates, like once you're metabolically healthy, I think most people can tolerate small amounts of carbohydrates relatively well. And I actually think it can be kind of good to mix it up as far as like from a palate standpoint. I'm a fan of finding, and it's very individual. You find some people do fine with certain vegetables. Some people do some low sugar fruits. Some people even do some starches, like, hey, I'm, once again, it's kind of rare, but if I'm metabolically healthy, can I have 100 grams of carbohydrates or less? That might be too high for some people. Some people, it might be 50 grams or less. Some people are like, yeah, I can't, if I go above 25, I have issues. Okay. You kind of find like your set point. And from there, and that's why, sometimes doing that carnivore elimination can be helpful, because, like, okay, I have my baseline and now I add maybe something back in. It's like, oh, my system tolerated that. I feel great. Cool. Or, ooh, that wasn't great. And then you can try something else.
Makes sense. I get it. So sugar addiction, that's a real thing. And people have come up to me and asked me for tips and advice, that struggle. And I guess I didn't have as much of a problem with sugar as a lot of people do, because that's not that for a lot of people, when you mention the sugar, it seems to be a deal breaker. Like they just do not want to part with it, and they would rather just continue down the trajectory they're going down instead of cutting out their desserts and their Starbucks and this and that. Do you have recommendations, tips, or any advice on how to cut the sugar addiction if that is possible?
Yeah, and I mean, I think you nailed it too. It's very interesting when you talk about even carbohydrates to some degree. People talk about it like you ask them to sacrifice their firstborn. I had a woman in long-term care that she told me if I touched her soda, she would break both of my arms. And when I suggested that she give up soda, I mean, this is somebody who's bedbound because they're so obese. So once again, if you don't believe in sugar addiction, I encourage you to talk to some people who literally threaten violence. If I had a woman tell me she would rather die than give up cake. And that was the first time I was suspended from the hospital because I told her she was on her way and she was, but apparently you don't get to talk to people honestly at the coddle. That's a topic for another time. But yeah, so what we can do, and it can be overwhelming because it's not just, I mean, one, we do know that sugar and carbohydrates, there's a cycle. It lights up centers of your brain. It makes you feel good. And for a lot of people, it's one of the only coping mechanisms they know. It's like I'm in a place where I'm losing home, or I'm struggling, or I'm going through divorce. This makes me feel okay. So you're literally telling me to give up the one thing that's keeping me from like being over the ledge. And so I get it. I validate that and I understand that. So really, some people have to go very slowly. Maybe it's like, okay, we just start with getting rid of, sugary drinks. We get rid of soda. We get rid of, I'm not ready to give up my carbs. Or then, and then that's when, I know people have different opinions on this, but I'm not totally opposed to using some of the artificial sweeteners as almost like a bridge. Like, okay, maybe we do this just to get you to where you feel like, okay, I've got something here. And then, eventually move off that. And I do validate that some people say you just need to get rid of it. Even keeping, I know Vinnie Tortorich, Mariel Glant, she's like, they're both like, just cut it off, get rid of it. But I also see the flip side. If somebody really, really is struggling and if they're not willing to, maybe we can work with them to help in that way.
It's funny, I wrote down a note to ask you, what are your thoughts on zero sugar drinks or foods or whatever?
Yeah, I would say the less the better. Honestly, you should probably have none. But I say that as I'm someone who consumes LMNT, when I'm running, so I don't think the having it once, and you have to know yourself. I've had people tell me I have even a little bit of sugar sweetened something, and the artificially sweetened, and it just causes me to crave sugar. It causes me to binge. It keeps that sweet taste alive. So if you know that for yourself, then yeah, you shouldn't have that. And unfortunately, those artificial sweeteners are so much sweeter than just like a regular sugar. So in I guess a perfect world, you would become metabolically healthy and just eat some normal sweetness, which would be maybe a little bit of fruit. But even the fruit we have today is a lot sweeter than traditionally it was. So especially if you're coming from, your goal is weight loss, you're dealing with obesity. I mean, it's so much better just to really cut off that artificial sugar and just focus on real food.
It's funny, I'm guilty of the element or the relights or whatever too, because I like to try to pretend I'm an athlete sometimes and rely heavily on it, especially here in Texas. We sweat a lot.
Oh, it's so hot. But, yeah. When I was
but I get what you're saying, because it could be a tool to wean somebody off. But I also feel like it could be that trigger for certain people as well, because I had a long run of zero sugar energy drinks thinking, oh, that's zero sugar. And it jacked me for a while. And I put on weight because I didn't think I was doing my way of eating wrong, but it was causing me to crave things. And I didn't think I was eating them, but I'd be snacking here and there. It just created a trigger,
Yeah, I think too, when we remove that, when we're really focusing on just savory things, it's easier to tune into our actual hunger. Where if you think about, I can't tell you how many people I know that can eat a whole pint of keto ice cream. I mean, that sweet taste, even though it's keto, will keep you coming back, right? So it's much harder to overeat on just like a actual food. So many of us, myself included, have just not really focused on just real food. We're always having, the granola bar or this sweet treat or this or whatever. So just giving your body and yourself kind of a chance to figure it out. But just that, I think it could be really powerful for most people.
Right. Yeah, I agree. It's it's funny how it works. So you're correct me on which one is correct. You're ultra marathon or ultra runner, or is that the
I
same
think either
thing?
one. It just, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's technically, I think an ultra is anything over a marathon
Okay.
distance. So
Okay. Gotcha. So with that, I know in that industry, training is just all carbs, all carbs, all carbs, all carbs. When you're doing those, do you allow carbs, or what is your feeling for those situations?
yeah, I think what really helped me initially was being very low carb, even during training, even during the longer runs, running closer to zone 2. So keeping your heart rate relatively low, but, just doing like the electrolytes. But when I'm prepping for a race, because I will take in carbohydrates during a race, because, it's, my nutrition is really relative to my goals. My goal on race day is very different than any other day. And so what I like to do is I never start a run having an insulin response. And that's what, unfortunately, a lot of people do. That's what they teach you to do. And what do I mean by that? Most sports dietitians would tell you, like, have a half a bagel, have a banana, have some goo right before you run. And when you do that, once again, you're causing that insulin response. You're stopping your body from burning fat for fuel. So now you are completely dependent on carbohydrates. If you don't have carbohydrates every 30 to 40 minutes, you're going to start to have a decrease in performance, to where, I start my run with fat. I usually put some MCT, some coconut oil, butter in my coffee. And then about 45 minutes into my race, I'll start dosing with carbohydrates. But because I'm very fat adapted, my ability to burn fat is much higher, meaning I need less carbohydrates than I did when I was a much higher carbohydrate athlete. And why is that beneficial? A lot of people drop out of these longer races. Well, fatigue is certainly a factor, but also GI distress can be pretty gnarly. If you're trying to take in 60, 90, 100 grams of carbs an hour, it's a lot. Where I'm able to get away with quite a bit less than that, just because, once again, I'm literally using my own body fat for fuel.
What is your preferred intake for the carbohydrates when you're doing these?
Yeah, I played around with it. I've gone from 20 to like 30. Right now I'm kind of experimenting with 25 grams every like 40 minutes. So every like 5-ish miles. And I've tried a bunch of different stuff. I don't have a favorite. S Fuels is something that was made for like lower carbohydrate athletes, because they have a little bit of like coconut oil and other things. I've used Tailwind. I've used, really what I would tell people is being able to figure out how many carbohydrates you need per hour, potentially maybe working with a coach to help you get as fat adapted as possible. And then for like either heavy workouts or your long runs to really train for a race. That's because then you want to kind of train your gut too.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. I got you. So I mentioned in the beginning that you are a multiple book author. Can you let us know a few things here? What books you've written, kind of like a cliff note of what it is and where they could be found.
Yeah. So my first book, The Dietitian's Dilemma, the preface of that is, what would you do if your health was restored by doing the opposite of everything you were taught? And I wanted to really, it shares my story. And I wanted to speak about several disease states that we had not only the evidence, but also, I felt like I had testimonies from people I knew in the community, or my personal testimony. So I talk about low carbohydrate nutrition for type 2 diabetes, mental health disorders, including major depression, anxiety disorders, eating disorders, which is very controversial even still, and then heart disease and sarcopenia. And then I have a chapter on like plants versus animals, where we really talk about bioavailability, meaning like, it doesn't matter what I eat. Like if your body can't use it, it's effectively useless to you. And animal products are just so much more bioavailable than plants. And there's this whole silly movement to make us try to eat more big stuff that your body can't really use. And then I talk a little bit about my distance runnings. People are curious, like, what do you do? So I talk about, how I got into the ultra running. And and then my second book, I was inspired. Woke up one morning and saw a story that they were coming out with new medication for children with type 2 diabetes. And I was so angry. And I'm like, I'm going to write a kid's book about kids who have type 2 diabetes. And I was like, that's dumb. Nobody's going to want to read that. And I was on a run. And there was a woman in our town running for mayor. Her name was Sarah Fox. And I was like, Foxabetes. I was like, that's it. Freddie. And so it's a book about a fox. It's called The Fox Family Food Fight. And little Freddie Fox gets type 2 foxabetes. And the foxatician at the hospital is not particularly helpful. So it's kind of their journey to finding out, going back to their traditional diet.
Where could people purchase them?
Oh, it's on Amazon. Yeah. So,
Amazon. Okay.
yep.
Awesome. Okay. We're getting close to wrap time, so I want to ask, what's the best way for, you mentioned your website, or was it, yeah, website, where can people find you?
Yeah. And so normally very active on social media. I'm currently in a social media sabbatical for the next couple of weeks, and it's been wonderful. No, I love social media. Their social media is most of the time very, very positive. I'm on Run, Eat, Meet, Repeat on Instagram, Michelle Hurn RD on X. And once again, if people want to get a hold of me right away, I would just say send me an email through the dietitiansdilemma.net website.
Great. And so, and since Robyn's out, I'll try to figure out how to be smart enough to put links in our description. If not, I got a 14-year-old daughter that can probably show me how to do it.
Wonderful.
So, yeah. So we ask a question, the last question to all our guests, and that is, if you have one tip, and that one could grow a little bit if you need it to be. One tip or word of advice for someone beginning their journey in low carb, what would it be?
The first thing that I tell anybody is, and it's not even nutrition related, but I think sometimes we skip this and it causes us more problems down the road, is start with some radical honesty. Like when I, was my health was a mess. It wasn't like, oh yeah, Michelle, my health's isn't very good. It was my life was falling apart physically, mentally, spiritually, it was a mess. And this isn't a time to be like, oh, I suck. No, it's like, write it down. Like, what's going on? I have every day at 3:00, I feel like I want to take a nap. I'm short with my partner. I hate my job. Like, just write it down, get it, like, look at it, say like, okay, I'm 50 pounds overweight, and because when it's like there, sometimes I think we want to either make things way worse than they are sometimes, or sometimes we want to just, oh, it's not that bad. It's like, yeah, maybe it is that bad, or maybe it's not. So getting like real with yourself, I think, is a really good starting point, because then from there, now we have a slight, this is where we're at. And then you can figure out where you want to go. And that's when, whether you're going to do this yourself or work with somebody, it kind of helps, it's so helpful for me when I'm working with somebody. They can say like, this is what's going on. These are my goals. This is what I want to do, versus just kind of like, I don't know, so being really honest with yourself, because, one thing my dad told me when I was much younger, and it's totally true, is your life can look totally different in 6 months. Being successful in anything, it's not sexy. It's, why do I run well, or why will I race well? It's not because like, oh wow, Michelle's all this talent. I have 23andMe says I should be a sprinter. I'm not very talented, but every day it's time on task. I'm training every day. I'm eating this way every day. I'm making sure I get sleep. I'm trying to get some sun. I'm trying to have some fun, so that is what will make you successful. And also, one other thing I like to share is the body and brain has a tremendous capacity to heal. Like, if you're someone who's like, I've been depressed for decades, I've never been able to lose weight, you owe it to yourself just to try. Like, if you haven't tried this way of eating, you have nothing to lose. First of all, safe, sustainable, effective. And it could be like one of the greatest changes you make.
That was all excellent stuff. And I kept looking away because I was writing notes down on what you were saying. So I greatly appreciate you being here. It was a pleasure to speak with you. I want to figure out how to stop all this. Don't go anywhere, because I want to say bye to you all. With that, thank you for joining us. On behalf of Robyn and I, we appreciate everyone joining. You guys have a good night.
Thank you.